Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, our mission really is to give you a kind of shortcut, a way to grasp the current global picture by looking at one big contradiction.
Right. It's this gap, isn't it, between the uh, high-level talks, the diplomacy,
Yeah, like the UN Climate Summit, COP30.
exactly, that world, and then the often brutal, violent reality on the ground for people actually trying to protect the environment.
So we're diving into how these two worlds collide and what that tells us about, well, about accountability globally.
Let's start with the summit then. COP30 in Belém, Brazil.
Okay, so apparently the first day had torrential rain, lightning, the works, but inside, the mood was actually quite cooperative.
It was, surprisingly so. You know how these things often get bogged down early on with fights over the agenda?
Oh yeah, the procedural wrestling matches?
Well, they largely avoided that this time. The whole agenda just sailed through, which is apparently a big win for the COP president, Andre Correa de Lago.
He's a veteran, isn't he? Been around since the '92 Earth Summit.
He is. And the thinking is he used his experience to kind of shunt the really tricky stuff into smaller, quieter consultations. Very
Right.
diplomatic.
Smart move. So a good procedural start for Brazil. And we also know who's hosting next.
Well, not next. We know QT32 in 2027 is Ethiopia. Addis Ababa, that was unanimous from the African countries. Apparently Nigeria also put in a bid.
Right. But what about COP31 in 2026? Still up in the air.
Still a contest. It's between Turkey and Australia. And Australia's bidding with the Pacific Islands.
That's significant. Gives their bid a strong moral weight, given the threats those islands face from climate change.
Definitely. But okay, all this procedural stuff, this relative calm, it's kind of masking the real fight at this summit, isn't it?
Which is?
Establishing a mandatory, enforceable roadmap to phase out fossil fuels. That's the big one.
The core issue.
Mhm.
And Brazil's President Lula, he's signaled support, said humanity needs to overcome its dependence.
Yeah, he has. And Brazil is in a really interesting spot here. I mean, they're a top 10 oil and gas producer globally.
Right, so they're trying to be a climate leader while also being a major fossil fuel player. That's complex.
It is. Does it give them leverage? Maybe. Can they talk to both sides, the producers like Saudi Arabia and the countries pushing hardest for the phase-out? Perhaps.
But the resistance must be huge.
Oh, absolutely. Saudi Arabia, other like-minded nations, they're pushing back hard, trying to block it or at least water it down.
How? By focusing on finance.
Exactly. Shift the focus to money, which is always contentious and can easily bog things down, slow the whole process.
So the bottom line is, if this roadmap isn't mandatory for everyone, it's basically toothless.
Pretty much, as one source put it, it risks being little more than greenwashing. A big announcement without real substance or commitment.
Just allows everyone an easy way out.
And speaking of greenwashing, that accusation was literally being made right outside the summit doors.
At the AgriZone.
Yeah. This dedicated area for agribusiness, sponsored by giants like Nestle and Bayer. Climate campaigners held a protest there.
And what was their argument? What evidence did they bring?
They pointed to industrial agriculture as a huge driver of deforestation, especially in the Amazon, obviously very relevant being in Belém. And they highlighted that it produces about a third of global greenhouse gas emissions.
So they see this AgriZone as just cover.
They called it nothing more than a huge greenwashing space. They argued these companies use buzzwords like climate smart and digitization to hide a model that's fundamentally about profit from a globalized food system, not sustainability.
Okay, so that's the policy tension, the protests. Now let's pivot. Because this failure of accountability, this profiteering, it has incredibly stark, violent consequences on the ground. We need to talk about the DRC.
The Democratic Republic of Congo, specifically the Mangrove Marine Park.
An internationally recognized reserve, right, Ramsar Convention Site since '92, home to manatees, endangered sea turtles.
A really vital place. And in 2022, a conservation worker, Kim Rebholz, was hired to help protect it.
And just months in, he finds
An industrial-scale palm oil plantation. Over 400 hectares, that's nearly 1,000 acres. Smack bang inside the park boundaries.
inside the protected area. Clearly visible.
So big it was visible from space. And the corruption link was immediate.
Oh, so.
His own deputies told him the plantation belonged to a company linked to the former president, Joseph Kabila.
Wow. Okay.
And Rebholz didn't stop there. He also found illegal logging, illegal oil ports. One connected to a Chinese group, another to a General Amisi, known as one of Kabila's enforcers.
So he's uncovering this high-level network of exploitation within a supposedly protected park. He must have known the risk.
He demanded an inquiry, and the reprisal was Horrific.
Tell us.
7 armed, hooded men broke into his home. They staged a mock execution in front of his young son.
Oh my God.
And then 2 of them raped his wife while he and his son were held at gunpoint. They explicitly said they were there because of his work in the park, calling him the white bastard.
Just unbelievable brutality. What happened to him?
He fled the country, understandably. And no investigation into the attack ever happened. Nothing.
Just impunity.
Complete impunity at the time. But there's a sort of postscript. Later on, Kabila was convicted in absentia by the DRC government treason, corruption, and others involved, Ngumbi, Walungila, were sanctioned by the U.S. for corruption linked to wildlife trafficking.
So some measure of accountability eventually, but far too late for Reb Holtz and his family, and after immense suffering.
Exactly. And it just shows the extreme end of what happens when accountability totally breaks down. Powerful people acting completely above the law.
And that vulnerability, that breakdown, it isn't just in places like the DRC. We're seeing stability threatened elsewhere too, right? Like the violence resurfacing in Pakistan.
Yeah, there's been a definite and worrying uptick in attacks linked to the Pakistani Taliban, the TTP.
Like the suicide bombing this week?
In Islamabad, yes.
Yeah.
Targeted a district court, hit a police car, killed 12 people, wounded nearly 30. It's serious.
And wasn't there another incident at a military college?
Right, in Wana. Security forces stopped an attempt by militants blamed on the TTP, though they denied it to take cadets hostage.
So active conflict. And the diplomatic angle here is stalled.
Completely stalled. Peace talks between Pakistan and Afghanistan are dead in the water because Kabul refused to give Pakistan a written promise that the TTP wouldn't use Afghan soil to launch attacks.
So the violence connects directly back to those cross-border tensions, unresolved issues fueling current conflict.
Precisely. Now, if the TTP is a sort of traditional territory-based threat.
We're seeing other kinds of threats emerge, more digital ones, like in Germany.
Exactly. A German-Polish man, Martin S., arrested in Dortmund. He was allegedly running a darknet site.
And this site wasn't just chat, was it? It was calling for actual violence.
Explicitly calling for attacks on politicians, offering crypto rewards for carrying them out.
That's chilling. Were specific people named?
Oh, yes. Detailed lists. Names, personal info, even explicit death sentences. Former Chancellors Merkel and Scholz were on there.
Just openly inciting assassination on the darknet.
And the prosecutors found the content was also clearly right-wing extremist, racist. It taps into that broader concern in Germany about what observers call a roughening of political culture.
We've seen other attacks, haven't we, on political figures like Yvonne Mossler, Franziska Giffey.
And tragically, the murder of Walter Lübcke back in 2019 by a neo-Nazi. So this darknet site, it's part of a disturbing pattern.
It raises that question again, doesn't it? If violence protects corruption in the DRC, is digital incitement now shielding or enabling political extremism in places like Germany?
It's a very worrying trend. Different methods, maybe, but aiming to destabilize through fear and violence.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. From direct violence and extremism to maybe more systemic issues, failures of policy, social neglect. Let's look at the UK.
All right. Starting with the economy, the jobs market specifically.
The numbers aren't great, are they? Unemployment up to 5%.
Yeah, nearly 1.7 million people claiming benefits. There was one tiny positive. Job vacancies actually went up slightly.
First time in how long?
Over 3 years. But it's a tiny increase. Just 2,000 more vacancies, bringing the total to 723,000. Still way, way down from the peak in 2022, which was around 1.3 million.
So a long way to go. And what about wages? There's a gap there, too.
There is. Public sector wage growth at 6.6% is running quite a bit harder than the private sector, which is at 4.2%.
And businesses, are they feeling confident enough to hire?
Doesn't seem like it. Experts say business leaders are nervous. They're worried about government budget pressures, policy uncertainty, especially around things like national insurance costs.
Mayoral taxes, basically.
Right. And when businesses are unsure about future costs, they tend to hold off on hiring. So the market stays sluggish. It's a kind of systemic drag.
That economic uncertainty, that's one kind of neglect, perhaps. But there's a much more direct, tragic example of failure in the UK system we need to touch on. The case of Miss Figueiredo.
Yes. A hospital trust fined £500,000 over her death on a mental health unit.
And the core issue was a known risk being ignored.
Entirely. The hospital knew bin bags were a risk on the ward. They'd even removed them from patient rooms before.
Okay, so they identified the danger.
Yes. But they ignored warnings from Miss Figueiredo's own family. And crucially, they didn't remove the bin bags from a communal toilet area. which wasn't locked.
A clear, foreseeable risk flagged by the family, and they failed to act on it in that specific location.
Exactly. And the judge's comments were absolutely damning.
What did the judge say?
Called it a terrible tragedy, obviously, but also criticized the staff member who was actually convicted, though they're appealing, saying they had no real insight into what you did wrong and were basically in a state of denial.
Denial again, just like ignoring the warnings.
And the judge also slammed the hospital's recording and assessment of self-harm incidents overall, calling it lamentable.
It's heartbreaking. And it echoes what we saw elsewhere, doesn't it? Whether it's illegal logging in a protected park in the DRC or known safety risks on a hospital ward in the UK. Accountability fails when warnings are ignored and denial sets in.
The mechanism is different, the context is different, but the outcome harm caused by a failure to act on known risks is tragically similar.
So today, we've really spanned that huge range. We started at COP30 in Belém, high-level climate talks, aiming for global change.
It immediately saw how that clashes with the reality of environmental crime, corruption, and violence in places like the DRC's Mangrove Park.
Then we looked at security threats, the resurgent TTP violence in Pakistan, contrasting with sort of modern digital extremism targeting politicians via the darknet in Germany.
And finally, we brought it to the UK, seeing how economic uncertainty in the job market and truly devastating failures in healthcare oversight both represent different kinds of systemic breakdown.
The core tension running through all of this seems to be, can these big top-down efforts, like the Climate Summit, ever really get a grip on these messy, decentralized, often profitable, and sometimes violent realities on the ground?
That's the central question, isn't it? How do you enforce accountability across such different scales and systems, especially when powerful interests, whether corporate or political or criminal, benefit from the status quo? They're all linked by that challenge. Who holds power to account when things go wrong?
So, thinking about this for you, our listener, we've dug into some really specific, granular details today. I mean, an illegal plantation so big you can see it from space, death threats on the darknet, known documented risks being ignored in a hospital.
Pretty stark examples.
Right. So maybe the final thought is this. How much of the progress we actually need on climate, on security, on social justice relies less on those grand international agreements, maybe?
And more on the courage of individuals. The whistleblowers like rebels, the campaigner outside the agrizone, or just the meticulous day-to-day work of ensuring known risks are dealt with on that hospital ward.
It forces you to think about where really change comes from and the absolutely critical role of transparency, of shining a light and making accountability possible across all these different complex issues, something to mull over.
Definitely. Thank you for diving deep with us today.
We'll see you next time.